Westbrook Academy stood proudly against the autumn skyline of Greenwich, Connecticut, its Gothic spires piercing through a canopy of centuries-old oak trees aflame with October colors. Established in 1876, the prestigious private school had long served as a bastion of academic excellence and old money tradition. The campus, sprawling across 37 acres of meticulously maintained grounds, represented more than just an educational institution. It stood as a symbol of power, privilege, and the careful preservation of social hierarchies. The morning mist still clung to the manicured lawns as students made their way across the quad, their designer backpacks and carefully curated uniforms marking them as members of America's elite. The limestone buildings, their walls carpeted with ivy and their windows gleaming in the early morning light, housed classrooms where generations of future leaders had been molded according to Westbrook's exacting standards. September 2023 marked a significant departure from tradition with the appointment of Dr. Marcus Washington as principal. His credentials were impeccable: a PhD in educational leadership from Harvard, successful tenure as academic dean at Phillips Exeter Academy, and numerous published works on educational reform in prestigious journals. Yet the whispers that circulated through faculty lounges and parent gatherings focused less on his achievements and more on the uncomfortable reality that he represented change in an institution resistant to it. The school board's decision to hire Dr. Washington stemmed from mounting pressure to modernize Westbrook's approach to diversity and inclusion. Recent incidents at peer institutions had highlighted the vulnerabilities of schools that failed to adapt to changing social expectations. The board, led by forward-thinking members who recognized the need for evolution, saw in Dr. Washington an opportunity to demonstrate progressive values while maintaining academic excellence. What the board didn't anticipate was how thoroughly this change would test Westbrook's commitment to these ideals. Dr. Washington's appointment coincided with another significant arrival: his 15-year-old daughter, Alexandra Washington. Known as Alex to her friends, she embodied both her father's sharp intelligence and her late mother's quiet dignity. The decision to enroll Alex without immediately revealing her connection to the new principal stemmed from Dr. Washington's desire to give his daughter space to establish herself on her own merits. Room 427, located in the East Wing of Preston Hall, would become the epicenter of transformation at Westbrook Academy. The classroom belonged to Ms. Victoria Harrington, whose 30-year tenure had made her something of an institution within an institution. The space itself reflected its occupants' philosophy. Rigid rows of antique desks faced an imposing teacher's podium, while portraits of canonical authors, all white, all male, gazed sternly from walls painted in traditional Westbrook blue. Miss Harrington herself presented an imposing figure. Her silver hair, always perfectly styled, crowned a face that had mastered the art of subtle disapproval. Her clothes, exclusively from high-end designers, spoke of old New England money and generational privilege. She wore her academic achievements like armor: a master's degree from Yale, numerous teaching awards, and a reputation for producing students who excelled at prestigious universities. The advanced English literature class of Room 427 represented a microcosm of Westbrook's student body, though the demographics still heavily favored privilege. Among the 24 students, several would play pivotal roles in the unfolding drama. Emily Chen occupied a seat in the front row, her perfectly pressed uniform and immaculate notes reflecting her determination to exceed already high expectations. As a second-generation Chinese American, Emily navigated the complex waters of fitting in while standing out academically, her quiet observations of classroom dynamics growing increasingly pointed as the semester progressed. Michael Bradford III claimed his territory in the back row, his posture reflecting generations of entitlement. The Bradford family name graced the Science Building, their donations having helped shape Westbrook's physical and cultural landscape for decades. Michael's worldview, shaped by privilege and reinforced by institutional structures, was about to face unprecedented challenges. Sarah Martinez, seated near the middle of the room, had earned her place through academic excellence and a prestigious scholarship. Her awareness of class and racial dynamics, shaped by her own experiences as a scholarship student in an elite institution, made her particularly attuned to the subtle currents of discrimination flowing through the space. Into this carefully balanced ecosystem stepped Alexandra Washington. Alex selected a seat in the third row, close enough to demonstrate engagement, but not so close as to seem eager. Her natural hair, styled in elegant twists, and her uniform, worn with unconscious grace, reflected both confidence and careful adherence to school regulations. The slight tension in her shoulders betrayed an awareness of being observed, evaluated, and judged before speaking a single word. Miss Harrington's initial assessment of Alex manifested in subtle ways during those first few weeks. The slight pause before calling her name during roll call carried weighted significance. The marginally raised eyebrow at Alex's articulate answers suggested surprise that betrayed underlying prejudices. The way her eyes would skip over Alex's raised hand during class discussions spoke volumes about preconceived notions and ingrained biases. The first concrete signs of trouble emerged during their analysis of The Great Gatsby. Miss Harrington's traditional interpretation focused heavily on themes of romantic tragedy and the American dream, carefully steering discussions away from more critical examinations of class and privilege. Alex's first essay, a masterful analysis of social mobility and racial exclusion in the 1920s, earned a B-, accompanied by comments about overemphasis on peripheral themes and misunderstanding the author's intentions. The grading disparity became impossible to ignore when Michael Bradford's superficial analysis of the same novel, filled with basic observations and grammatical errors, received an A with praise for grasping the universal themes of Fitzgerald's work. Emily Chen's careful documentation noted this incident as the first clear example of academic discrimination, her neat handwriting recording dates, quotes, and context with scientific precision. As September gave way to October, the tension in room 427 grew increasingly palpable. Miss Harrington's mask of professional detachment showed signs of strain whenever Alex spoke, her responses becoming more pointed, her criticism more personal. The teacher's feedback on Alex's work focused increasingly on minor technical details while dismissing the substance of her analysis, particularly when that analysis touched on themes of race, class, or social justice. The class's study of Toni Morrison's Beloved marked a significant escalation. Miss Harrington's discomfort with the material manifested in attempts to sanitize discussions, steering conversations away from the novel's explicit engagement with historical trauma and systemic racism. Her introduction to the unit emphasized the universal themes of motherhood and loss, deliberately downplaying the specific historical context of slavery and its lasting impacts. The turning point came during a particularly tense class discussion about Beloved in mid-October. Alex's carefully researched presentation on intergenerational trauma and its representation in Morrison's work prompted an unprecedented reaction from Miss Harrington. The teacher's interruptions grew more frequent, her criticism more pointed, until the academic facade crumbled entirely. Alex's analysis drew parallels between Morrison's depiction of historical trauma and contemporary manifestations of systemic racism. Her evidence-based argument, supported by scholarly sources and textual references, demonstrated a sophistication that would have impressed most educators. Miss Harrington's response, however, revealed the depth of her prejudices. The teacher's dismissal of Alex's work moved beyond academic criticism into personal attack. Her comments about certain students trying to politicize everything and missing the universal human experience carried unmistakable undertones of racial bias. The classroom atmosphere grew thick with tension as other students witnessed this increasingly obvious display of discrimination. Emily Chen's notebook documented the incident with clinical precision, recording not only Miss Harrington's words, but also the reactions of classmates. Michael Bradford's typical expression of entitled amusement gave way to uncomfortable recognition as the teacher's behavior became impossible to ignore. Sarah Martinez's hands clenched into fists beneath her desk, her own experiences with subtle discrimination rising to the surface. The aftermath of that class session rippled through Westbrook Academy's carefully maintained social hierarchy. Whispers in hallways and cautious conversations in the library reflected growing awareness of the situation in room 427. Some students, emboldened by Alex's quiet dignity in the face of injustice, began sharing their own experiences with discrimination at Westbrook. Unknown to Miss Harrington, her behavior had caught the attention of other faculty members. Several teachers, troubled by what they observed during shared planning periods and casual interactions, began documenting their concerns. The French teacher, Madame Dubois, noted Miss Harrington's dismissive comments about Alex during faculty meetings. The school librarian, Miss Thompson, observed multiple instances of the teacher steering Alex away from certain research materials while enthusiastically assisting other students. Dr. Washington, maintaining professional distance while gathering evidence, felt the weight of dual responsibilities. As a principal, he needed to address institutional discrimination through proper channels. As a father, he witnessed his daughter's daily struggles with prejudice, her determination to succeed despite obstacles placed in her path. The situation reached a critical point during midterm evaluations. Miss Harrington's assessment of Alex's academic performance reflected personal bias rather than objective criteria. The disparity between Alex's consistently excellent work and her grades became impossible to justify through normal academic standards. The catalyst for confrontation arrived during parent-teacher conferences in late October. Miss Harrington, confident in her position and unaware of the connection between Alex and Dr. Washington, requested an urgent meeting to discuss what she termed serious concerns about Alex's academic performance and attitude. The conference was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon, after regular classes had ended. Room 427 took on an almost theatrical atmosphere, as shadows lengthened across the wooden floors and autumn light filtered through the heavy curtains. Miss Harrington arranged her materials meticulously on her desk, preparing to present her case against a student she had already judged and condemned. The extensive documentation she had compiled revealed more about her own biases than any legitimate academic concerns. Her notes focused obsessively on what she perceived as Alex's challenging attitude and inappropriate perspectives, while dismissing the student's consistently thorough research and insightful analysis. The teacher had even assembled a collection of Alex's essays, heavily marked with red ink, that emphasized minor grammatical points while ignoring the sophisticated arguments presented. As Miss Harrington awaited the parent she expected to intimidate with her academic authority, the atmosphere in room 427 grew charged with anticipated confrontation. The portraits of dead authors seemed to watch with particular interest as footsteps approached from the hallway. The sharp click of dress shoes against marble flooring carried the weight of authority that Miss Harrington would soon find exceeded her own. Dr. Washington's entrance transformed the space instantly. His presence, commanding yet controlled, filled the room with an authority that made Miss Harrington's academic posturing seem suddenly insignificant. The moment of recognition, the widening of her eyes, the slight parting of her lips, the involuntary step backward, marked the beginning of her understanding that everything was about to change. The color drained from Miss Harrington's face as realization dawned. The carefully prepared speech about academic standards and appropriate classroom behavior died unspoken. Her hands, usually steady with confidence, trembled slightly as she gripped the edge of her desk. The temperature in room 427 seemed to drop several degrees as Dr. Washington settled into one of the student desks, his calm demeanor masking the storm about to break. The documentation Dr. Washington produced reflected months of careful observation and systematic recording of discriminatory behavior. Emily Chen's detailed notes had found their way to his office through appropriate channels. Other faculty members had submitted their observations, creating a pattern of evidence impossible to dismiss as misunderstanding or coincidence. Alex Washington's personal journey through these events reflected both resilience and wisdom beyond her years. Rather than allowing the experience to embitter her, she developed a deeper understanding of institutional change and personal growth. Her academic performance, no longer undermined by prejudice, soared to new heights. Her essays and presentations, now fairly evaluated, demonstrated the sophisticated analysis that Miss Harrington had tried to suppress. Dr. Washington's dual role as father and administrator had required careful navigation of personal and professional boundaries. His handling of the situation became a case study in educational leadership, demonstrating how administrators could address discrimination while maintaining professional integrity. His approach emphasized systematic documentation and due process, while never losing sight of the human impact of discrimination. The physical transformation of Westbrook's campus reflected deeper cultural changes. New artwork, celebrating diverse achievements, adorned the halls. The library expanded its collections to include works from varied cultural perspectives. Even the school's architectural plans for future buildings incorporated design elements promoting inclusivity and community engagement. By the end of the academic year, Westbrook Academy had fundamentally changed. The institution's response to discrimination in Room 427 sparked a broader examination of privilege, power, and responsibility in educational settings. The school's experience demonstrated that meaningful change required more than policy updates. It demanded a fundamental shift in institutional culture and individual mindsets. The most profound impacts of the Room 427 incident emerged in the years that followed. 5 years after the confrontation, Westbrook Academy had evolved into a significantly different institution. The changes initiated by the Harrington incident had catalyzed a complete institutional metamorphosis that extended far beyond addressing individual instances of discrimination. The class of 2028, the first to graduate after experiencing all of Westbrook's implemented changes, demonstrated remarkable differences in both academic achievement and social awareness. Statistical analysis showed that achievement gaps between different demographic groups had narrowed significantly. More importantly, anonymous surveys revealed a dramatic improvement in students' sense of belonging and academic self-confidence across all backgrounds. Ms. Harrington's departure from education became a cautionary tale in teacher training programs across the country. Her case appeared in educational psychology textbooks as an example of how implicit bias could corrupt academic evaluation and damage student development. Yet her story was presented not merely as a warning, but as part of a larger narrative about institutional transformation and the possibility of positive change. The transformation of Westbrook Academy extended far beyond personnel changes. By December, the institution had embarked on a comprehensive overhaul of its policies, procedures, and cultural foundations. The Board of Trustees, recognizing the potential for lasting damage to the school's reputation, allocated substantial resources to addressing systemic issues within the institution. The immediate changes began in the English department. A complete curriculum review revealed unconscious biases in text selection and teaching methodologies. The narrow canon of dead white authors expanded to include diverse voices and perspectives. New course offerings emerged, including contemporary world literature and studies in cultural identity, designed to broaden students' literary and cultural horizons. Room 427 itself underwent a symbolic transformation. The portraits of traditional authors came down, replaced by a carefully curated collection representing diverse literary voices. The rigid rows of desks gave way to flexible seating arrangements, encouraging discussion and collaboration. Even the heavy curtains were replaced with lighter drapes, allowing natural light to flood the space that had once felt so oppressive. Dr. Washington's leadership during this period demonstrated the delicate balance between institutional authority and personal investment. His approach to reform emphasized accountability while creating pathways for growth and understanding. Mandatory sensitivity training for faculty evolved into ongoing professional development focused on cultural competency and inclusive teaching practices. The student body's response to these changes reflected deeper transformations within Westbrook's social fabric. The incident sparked the formation of new student organizations focused on promoting diversity and inclusion. The Student Diversity Council, initially formed in response to the events in Room 427, grew into an influential body within the school's governance structure. Alex Washington's role in these changes remained complex and multifaceted. Her quiet dignity throughout the ordeal had inspired others, yet she sought neither recognition nor revenge. Instead, she channeled her experience into positive action. working with the administration to develop peer support systems for students facing discrimination. The ripple effects extended beyond Westbrook's campus. Other prestigious preparatory schools began examining their own practices and policies. Educational conferences invited Dr. Washington to speak about institutional transformation and the challenges of addressing systemic discrimination in elite academic settings. The events at Westbrook became a case study in how traditional institutions could adapt to modern expectations of equity and inclusion. By the spring semester of 2024, Westbrook Academy had emerged as a model for institutional transformation. The changes implemented went far beyond superficial diversity initiatives, touching every aspect of school life. The hiring process for new faculty now included extensive screening for cultural competency. Admission procedures underwent revision to eliminate unconscious biases. Even the school's marketing materials reflected a new commitment to authentic representation and inclusion. The appointment of Dr. Maya Peterson as the new advanced English literature teacher marked another significant step forward. An accomplished scholar with degrees from Columbia and Stanford, Dr. Peterson brought fresh perspectives to the curriculum. Her approach to teaching classic literature acknowledged historical context while drawing meaningful connections to contemporary issues. Under her guidance, Room 47 became a space for genuine intellectual exploration and cultural exchange. Emily Chen's role evolved from quiet observer to active advocate. Her meticulous documentation of Miss Harrington's behavior had demonstrated the power of bearing witness. She established a student journalism initiative focused on addressing social justice issues within educational institutions. Her first investigative piece, examining the subtle ways privilege manifested in academic settings, won recognition from several national education organizations. Michael Bradford III's transformation proved particularly noteworthy. The experience forced him to confront his own privileged perspective and unconscious biases. His family's influence, previously exercised mainly through donations, shifted toward supporting initiatives promoting educational equity. The Bradford Scholarship for Diverse Voices in Literature, established in response to the events in Room 427, provided opportunities for underrepresented students to attend Westbrook. Sarah Martinez channeled her experiences into creating support networks for scholarship students. Her weekly discussion groups evolved into formal mentoring programs, helping new students navigate both academic challenges and social dynamics. Her initiatives received institutional support, becoming integral parts of Westbrook's student support services. The broader educational community took notice of Westbrook's transformation. Educational researchers began studying the institution's approach to reform, analyzing how traditional institutions could effectively address systemic discrimination. Articles in prominent education journals highlighted the school's methodology for implementing meaningful change while maintaining academic excellence. Emily Chen's documentation methods developed into a formal protocol for identifying and addressing discrimination in educational settings. The Chen Protocol, as it became known in educational circles, provided clear guidelines for students and faculty to document and report concerning behaviors while maintaining professional standards and protecting all parties involved. Her work earned her early admission to Yale's education policy program, where she continued researching institutional reform. Michael Bradford III's evolution from privileged observer to active ally influenced his entire family's approach to educational philanthropy. The Bradford Foundation shifted its focus from funding physical infrastructure to supporting initiatives promoting educational equity. Their annual conference on inclusive education became a significant event in the academic calendar, drawing educators and administrators from across the globe. Sarah Martinez's mentoring program expanded beyond Westbrook, developing into a national network supporting students from underrepresented backgrounds in elite educational institutions. Her innovative approach to peer support and cultural navigation earned recognition from the Department of Education and inspired similar programs at other prestigious schools. The impact on Alex Washington's life trajectory proved particularly significant. Her experience became the subject of her college admission essay, not as a tale of victimhood, but as an analysis of institutional change and personal growth. Her acceptance to multiple Ivy League universities came with specific interest in her insights into educational reform and social justice. She chose Brown University, where she pursued a double major in education policy and literature, continuing her work on curriculum reform and inclusive education. Dr. Washington's leadership during this period earned him recognition as a pioneering figure in educational reform. His approach to addressing systemic discrimination while maintaining institutional stability became a model for other school administrators. His book, Beyond Diversity: Creating Truly Inclusive Educational Spaces, became required reading in educational leadership programs nationwide. Room 427 itself, once a symbol of institutional oppression, transformed into a learning laboratory for inclusive education. The space hosted regular seminars on cultural competency and workshops on inclusive teaching methods. The room's transformation from a traditional classroom to a collaborative learning environment symbolized the broader changes at Westbrook Academy. The reverberations extended into the broader educational landscape. Other prestigious institutions began examining their own practices more critically, recognizing that traditional measures of academic excellence needed to coexist with genuine commitment to equity and inclusion. The Westbrook model of institutional transformation appeared in academic journals and educational policy discussions as an example of successful systematic change. The story of prejudice and transformation at Westbrook Academy demonstrated that meaningful institutional change required more than surface-level diversity initiatives or policy updates. It demanded sustained commitment, systematic approach, and willingness to confront uncomfortable truths about privilege and power in educational settings. As Westbrook approached its 150th anniversary, the events in Room 427 had become part of the institution's origin story of transformation. The school's experience proved that even the most traditional institutions could evolve while maintaining academic excellence. More importantly, it showed that addressing discrimination required not just removing negative behaviors, but actively creating structures and cultures that promoted genuine inclusion and equity. The legacy of those months in Room 427 continued to influence new generations of educators and students. The lesson learned extended beyond addressing individual instances of discrimination to understanding how institutional structures could either perpetuate or combat systemic inequities. Westbrook's transformation demonstrated that change, while challenging, was both possible and necessary for educational institutions to truly serve all students.